Kicking us off right now is Vijay Chakilam, and I may have mispronounced your name, I apologize. So Vijay is building Cooper AI, where kids create and remix stories using generative AI. Today, he's sharing his talk, Building Safe and Creative AI Experience for Kids, which will offer real-world lessons on balancing creative freedom with responsible safety controls that apply to any human-centered AI product. Please welcome Vijay to the stage.
Thanks everyone for joining me for this talk here. Yeah, I'd like to, in the spirit of the conference, AI introduction, I'd like to walk you guys through a small beta program that we are currently undertaking to test our platform about like how kids are going to use AI to create remixes of classic books. So Hello Cooper is a reading platform where kids can choose any book of their choice and use Cooper AI to give it their own vision and make it their own. So create personalized versions of books. As we call it as remixing the books. Think of it as like Netflix for books, but then you can, but the kids can use AI to create their own versions of the book by reimagining a popular scene from the book. They can create different modalities. They can create conversations. They can create images, animations, videos, all the kinds of modalities that Gen AI currently supports. But then the biggest challenge is putting this kind of a technology in the hands of users like kids. You need to really double down on the kind of safety measures and the security measures that you want to take on the platform to really make the parents comfortable in putting this in the hands of the kids. So what we did is we onboarded like about 35 kids from our friends' close circles to test this system. And this is a study that we did. On the top right corner, you see a screenshot of how the interface looks like. It's a reader component where you have the text of the book on one side, and then you have access to like a little chat interface with Cooper AI, where you can have a conversation about the book. You can, again, that's where the kids would reimagine the scenes. They give the prompts, they make use of some of the scaffolding available in the platform to create their own remix versions. So 35 users observed. What we have seen so far is about 66% completion rate in terms of the remix of the books, which actually led us to one hypothesis that was kind of interesting for us in terms of how we thought about imposing constraints versus enabling creativity. So this is a scenario that I wanted to walk through, which is representative of what we observed during the initial days of the beta, where the kids started creating their remixes. It was all fine until a couple days, where things started to go downhill, where like small little prompts started having some kind of like a negative effect without any kind of like guardrails, where suddenly the completion rate started dropping, and then there were feedback, complaints from the parents about some of the responses that they're seeing with the AI. That brings us to the fundamental challenge, right? How do you build AI experiences for a user group like kids that is safe, that also scales, and also enhances creativity? So that's a kind of like the what we call it as like an impossible choice. We need all three, but we need to discover how. So that's the path that we got started. So the first thing we did is come up with a kind of like a 3-layer defense architecture. The first layer, actually the first 2 layers is about guardrails in terms of like the inputs. We want to make sure that, like again, kids, very playful, some mischievous, naughty, they want to try out stuff, especially with interacting with technology like AI, they're very creative. So you want to make sure that even when the kids are crossing a particular line, you want the AI to respond in a responsible way. So that's where like we put some input shields, where we are trying to understand whether there is any like toxicity involved in the messages or any kind of like inappropriateness depending on the age groups and so on. And the second layer is about assisting with the prompts. We added some scaffolding mechanisms under the hood that enhances the prompts in an appropriate way to, again, like assist with the creative intent of the users. So this layer is about generation scaffolding. And finally, the output validation. Again, like you also want to make sure that the content filtration happens. Your kid doesn't see any inappropriate content. You want to make sure that there's alignment in terms of the intent and the content that was responded by the AI. So this is a system design that we created, but then we needed a framework to measure the impact. We need to conduct the test and measure signals to make sure whether we are doing the right thing to achieve the balance that we are hoping to achieve between the 3 forces of AI that we saw in the previous slide: the safety, creativity, and scale. So for that, we made use of some external frameworks, some API-based services like Google Perspective API, and for all the measurement purposes, we relied heavily on post-hoc to collect a lot of these clickstream data. So these are some of the behavioral patterns that we detected. Again, like just want to call out the small sample alert here. I know it's only like 35 users, but the insights that we discovered were enlightening and we believe are put us in the right direction to continue our experimentation. So we saw about like 23 out of 35 users have always been completing their remixes. So that's a good signal for us. And what we're actually tracking roughly is whether they finished that particular story or that they keep editing to the completion, how much time that they spent. Did they come back later to create more remixes, or are there any complaints filed by their in the feedback by their parents? Next, we saw again it's kind of like no baseline for us to measure. Like it was just the beginning of the platform that we compared it with when we imposed this 3-layer defense architecture. We saw roughly about like 1.8 times jump in terms of the engagement. But again, engagement is mostly guessed. What we're doing here is we formed a North Star metric for our platform. And the idea is the more remixes that are created by the kids, there is a social angle into the platform as well, where let's say like my kid creates a remix of a book and they invite a bunch of other kids to review their remix, and they tend to remix the remix of another remix. It's kind of like that kind of like a virality aspect that we intend to encourage through the platform. So that's how we are measuring the engagement. It's about how many remixes of remixes are we seeing in the platform. It's kind of like vague at this point, but that's the North Star metric that we determine. Again, some of the engagement indicators: average session time, users who basically remixed, users who came back, number of remixes shared, and positive engagement with the remixes. And again, complaints, fortunately, none so far after the 3-layer defense architecture is implemented. Again, zero safety issues so far. And we're trying to expand on the safety checks that we are doing. David's talk was kind of like enlightening in the sense that it started to expand our thinking already. So that's great. Yeah, this is where we kind of like started to recognize a pattern, which is where that constraint paradox started to hit us, like which kind of is counterintuitive to the conventional thinking that constraints might hinder creativity. But our hypothesis is kind of like maybe there is like a sweet spot. Maybe some level of constraints are indeed like necessary to achieve that perfect harmony between safety, creativity, and the scale that we were actually trying to analyze as a trilemma. So the code samples that you're seeing here is actually representative of what we implemented. I was actually hoping to release it as like an implementation toolkit, open source. Not there yet quite, but hopefully the next coming few weeks, we would like to open source an implementation toolkit for everything that we did so far. So this is, again, this is like a timeline, or how we went about observing the data, and then like how we achieved that hypothesis about the constraint paradox. The initial phase, in the initial deployment, again, it was very early stage. We started observing these metrics about the 23 out of 35 completions, and 66% of people like who read through the complete stories. That's the first phase of initial deployment, and then in the second phase is where we started recognizing these patterns. It's the same system, but we are closely watching the user behavior evolve in terms of like how they are responding to the constraints that are imposed by these prompt scaffolds that we deployed under the hood. And yeah, this is where like we formed our hypothesis. We still need further A/B testing. We still need a lot of data. Again, as I said, like it's very small sample size, just 35 users. We are hoping to scale this to at least like a 200 beta user cohort to calculate any kind of like statistical significance in the data that we are seeing. And this is some of the research roadmap, how we are thinking about conducting this validation. Again, we are for the coming phases. Again, we started to scale from the 35 to 200, but then hopefully by the end of the year, we are hoping to get to about like 600 users to complete this phase of the A/B test. And this is the paradox that I was talking about, right? So with minimal constraints, we see basically like it's again like it's not tested with the minimal constraints at all, but this is a hypothesis that we formed based on the current system. The completion percentage might be very low as you increase the constraints by form of your layer 1 and layer 2 defenses. We saw an increase in the completion rate of the remixes and also the engagement, which is basically like the remix of remixes. But then we also have this theory that if you kind of like overdo the constraints, if you overdo the guardrails, it might eventually lower the creativity amount of the remixes and the engagement signal that you're seeing in the platform. But again, this is something that we need to validate by continuing our beta experiments. So this is the journey so far. We started from this pick any to kind of a trilemma. versus where we are right now is we are able to improve the safety, we are able to improve the creative outcomes in the platform, we are able to improve the scalability aspect as well, but there's still a lot to do. The journey continues. We are just getting started. Our ultimate goal is to achieve this perfect harmony between the three forces that we have identified for our platform. And yeah, finally, I think like so far we kind of like starting to formulate this framework as the three principles of lightweight alignment. Again, we haven't gone to like full-fledged reinforcement learning with human feedback kind of infrastructure yet, because still very early days. But from whatever implementation that we have done by the measurement framework and the three-layer defense architecture, we feel these three principles are going to serve us good, at least like until we discover new insights. So alignment as product design, kind of like not as an afterthought, but make it central to the user experiences. Again, like how do your users actually interact with your product, right? Like to Anne's point, I think like the biggest takeaway for me in her talk was about know your users, understand your users, and that will automatically lead you to the right AI strategy for your product. So that's the alignment as product design. And then again, behavior over preferences. This is where the instrumentation for your measurement is very important. Again, for our experimentation, we used post-hoc. There are a lot of other really great instrumentation tools available. You need to capture the right behavior signal. The config settings are not a proxy. Preferences might actually not give you the right signal. So invest on measuring behavior over preferences, because again, when we observed how children are responding to certain kinds of scaffolds that we implemented for the prompt enhancements, certain kinds of toxicity filters that we implemented as part of our layer 1 defense, it was very interesting to understand the completion rates progress as we continue to enhance our defense architecture. And that was only possible by way of instrumenting to measure the behavior signals. And yeah, again, the last but not the least, like the most interesting discovery was that constraints enable creativity, as opposed to like again, at least like our teams, like conventional thinking in terms of they might hinder creativity. But again, we are probably like looking at an optimal zone that actually balances this, but there is also a danger of hindering the creativity if you overdo this whole constraint mechanism. Yeah, that's all I've got.
All right, thank you, Vijay. Appreciate it. And we have time for questions.
Yeah.
So anybody out there? I see a question here. All right, let me get over there.
Thank you for the presentation. So interested this from the perspective of a parent and kind of looking at the fundamental premise. You're getting children to engage with reading, which is certainly laudable, but is there any concern about the risk of short-circuiting children in the writing process by giving them an easy way to generate materials rather than learning the rigor and the discipline of actually having to do it themselves?
Yeah, that's probably the great dilemma for the parents of this current generation, I guess.
Solve that for us if you can.
Yeah, I really wish. I have 3 kids, and I'm really worried, like about this whole potential risk of regression with AI. Instead of using AI as a tool to, move forward in terms of becoming better in creativity, you want to be very watchful about the regression that might happen. But I think the reality is we need to embrace AI. There's no way that you're that the kids are not going to use AI. What we are trying to do specifically with Hello Cooper is not trying to short circuit the writing abilities, but it's mostly about their comprehension and also about lowering the barrier of entry in terms of using AI for creative needs. Again, let's say if you want to create a scene from Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter Tea Party, right? I would actually think a traditional way of going about doing it is the kid might pick up like Photoshop or like other kind of like tools available on their iPads and start doing some digital drawing. Previously, like it might be just like painting on a pen using a sketch and a paper, but now it's probably like digital painting. But now the question is like, how do they leverage AI? I think like artists are already using AI to create art, but the barrier of entry that I observed is a bit too high for the kids to kind of like embrace that technology to be creative and create art. So that's what we are trying to achieve with Hello Cooper is give them a platform where the core activity is something that they're already familiar with, which is basically reading, but then give them access to a technology that they will inevitably have to use as they continue to grow up for all sorts of like creative needs, like whether they are doing art, whether they're writing, whether they are coding. Invariably they are going to use AI. So our vision is to help kids have Hello Cooper as a stepping stone to embrace this technology and understand it intimately, understand the pros and cons, how to use it effectively to their leverage for their creative needs.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I saw some hands. Yeah.
Hey, Vijay, thank you. That was a great talk. I have a quick question. With respect to all the safety protocols you're developing, can you speak towards like what kind of attrition you see in terms of token usage? As you like get like bad tokens that are unsafe or don't meet code or quality, is it like a material cost increase? And like, does that go back into your loop in terms of like improving the prompt payload to try to ensure that those things don't happen going forward? Things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, especially as a founder in terms of the cost. Again, the sample is quite small in our case. It wasn't a big concern, and that was also not something that we included in our metrics that we are actually measuring. But that's actually a great point in terms of keeping an eye about how these safety mechanisms are impacting the token usage. Again, without having numbers to back up, from what I've seen, the cost impact wasn't huge. That also may be because of the small sample size that we currently had. But also in terms of the token usage, the scaffolding that we have done is not like, too big. I mean, like again, I'm not sure if I have the prompts evolution here. Yeah, some of the prompts that we currently have, right? So current system, if you see here, it's probably a little bit longer than like some of the ones where like, there were like lighter constraints. I don't think like it's going to drastically impact, but again, it's something to watch out for when things really scale and we start to experiment with hundreds or maybe like thousands of users.
Thank you again, Vijay. One more time, a hand.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah.